Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. Rob, if you can unmute, we can get this show on the road, my friend. How you doing, Rob?
I'm good.
Good. Can you
Happy
hear me?
Juneteenth.
Yeah, you too, my brother. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, I can.
Hey, well, I'm going to assume we're okay unless someone tells us otherwise. Let's get our show on the road. So welcome, everyone who's within listening ear of Rob and I, and I'm so pleased to be able to work with him on this presentation. And, to save time, he and I put together a little background, high-level summary of our backgrounds. We're not going to read this to you because we really would rather spend the time sharing with you some ideas that we think are really, really important to your coaching career. So if you want to take a moment and look at this, you'll see that one of the things he and I share, other than having some really good-looking heads and hairdos, is that our backgrounds include being really soccer enthusiasts, both on and off the field, and having shared in a variety of roles that we believe will bring quite a bit of perspective to this presentation. So with that, let's get into it. What is it like to be professional? And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking that you're all looking at the slide going, okay, is this what we're going to have to look at for 45 minutes? No, but just like your players, you have to remind them about what is it like to be a player? What are your responsibilities? What am I asking of you as your coach when you show up? Well, we're saying, ask yourself that question as a professional coach. And it really is, sometimes we have to take the step back because we're so close to this profession and say, what have I done lately to increase my value? What have I done lately to increase my brand? What have I done lately to make me the coach that I want to be and the sought after resource for this sport that we all love? So these are just some comments about what professionalism is. But most importantly, I want you to pay attention to the last bullet because that's why we're here. And that's in being invested in your goals, being excited about your outcomes, being motivated about the need to continuously improve our skills, and to be an active contributor to the very sport that's been so good to us. Why is that? If you look at this slide, this is from Leadership IQ, and this is across all professions. And I love this. When I'm coaching goalkeeping coaches, I always say, what are the top attributes of a goalkeeper? And a lot of them will say shot stopping. And they'll list all these other skills that are all necessary for a very effective goalkeeper. But I tell them, the one that you don't have on the list or you've rated really low is decision making. That's actually number one. Because if you get the decision making right, everything else is going to follow. Positioning, communication, all those things that we work on. We'll take that now and make it analogous to a career. A lot of us think, and I've heard many of us, I've heard it on our Black soccer coaches calls. Hey, I was just as qualified as the other guy. I should have gotten the look. Well, you were. Matter of fact, you may have even been more qualified than that other recipient or candidate who got the job. But it's these other things that are so important, both on and off the field, to help you be as successful as you want to be. Look at this survey. This is a national survey, and it's been done a couple times over the last couple of years, and the results haven't changed much. Coachability and emotional intelligence, really key. And that first one, it's funny, we as coaches expect our players and other coaches to accept our feedback, but we're not always as good at making it easy for others to tell us what we need to hear versus what we want to hear. And emotional intelligence, being able to read the room, being able to step outside of ourselves sometimes and be vulnerable enough to accept and to do the things that are necessary to be successful. And yes, technical competence is on the list, but as you can see, it ranks at the lowest part. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to hone our skills, because that's the price of admission to this game and to this profession that we call coaching soccer. This is a great quote from the head and founder of Starbucks. I think it's very appropriate for us. He says to his employees around the world, we're not in the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee. So Rob and I put our heads together and said, what should be our motto? We believe we're not in the soccer business developing players. We are in the people business developing the game of soccer. When you shift that from just soccer to I'm in the people business, it changes the character of how you look at what you do every day and how you impact others. This is a great quote. And it's all about having a voice and establishing your voice. And as the world has gotten, we've started to get more seats at the table. In most organizations, they do that really well. Where we're still struggling, though, is in the area of inclusion, and that's having a voice, and most importantly, equity and belonging, and having that voice heard. And that's where we want to spend a little time today to help you improve your presence and help you improve your value to your organizations so that your voice is heard. Rob, I've said a lot in opening here. I want to turn it over to you. I know this is an area that clearly, in your own personal experiences, you've done a lot. Can you share a little bit with the group on this?
Yes, I'd be happy to, and it's very interesting because in my experience, I found that it was not so difficult to get a seat at the table. However, having a voice was another thing that took a little bit of time. And then once I felt that I had a voice, probably the most difficult thing was the belonging and really having that voice be heard. It really required self-assessment through some frustration, required some patience, understanding. And what I found was that, I had to take the time to get to know the people that were in the room, how they communicated, in essence, how the game is played. We would do that when we're scouting an opponent to find out their strengths, weaknesses, or whatever, and we would even do that within our own teams. So we also have to understand the professional protocol in that room. We have to have the ability to read the room, and in essence, through networking and things of that nature, we had to become that sought after resource that you spoke about earlier. I think it's very key that we, through our networking, prove that we are a valuable resource. So back to you.
Awesome, thank you. And I like the way you teed that up because that's really going to be part of our agenda today. So let's go there. So for those of you who may not know, the Black Soccer Coaches Advocacy Group about 2 years ago decided that professionalism and being a professional and the professional development program was going to be part of our curriculum. And we knew we had all the things we had to do on the field covered, but we said, let's build a curriculum to cover those areas that we also need to be good at, both on and off the field. And this little graphic here shows the 5 modules that we've created. Today, we've taken, based upon some surveys we've done from our constituents on what was most popular, both in the feedback of the ones we have done and the ones they want us to spend time on, we picked 3. So we're going to spend time here talking about connecting, that networking that Rob talked about, goal setting, and also managing risk. And then hopefully, for all of you who've gotten a little taste of this, you can consider this the appetizer for the meal. We hope to someday be able to deliver the expertise and behavior portions as well. That in the timeframes we had today, we knew we couldn't even do a quick flyby on those 2. And just so you know, each one of these modules is a 2-hour course when done in its entirety. So we're going to try to give you the highlights and give you some things to think about. And like we said, we hope to be able to work with you again soon and do a deeper dive. So let's start with this behavior around connecting. And again, we won't read the slides because we want to move quickly here. But these are some key attributes of successful people. Again, across all industries. They have a presence about them. You know who they are. You've seen them, right? How people see and hear you. How is their mindset? How do they engage? How do they read the room? Access. They are clever and skillful at getting access to the people and resources they need to be successful. They create advocates, and they do that through strategic networking. So let's talk a little bit about strategic networking. If you look at the graphic to the left there, having you in the middle, you're surrounded every day with influencers. These are people who influence you, and these are people who, if you leverage them, can be your advocates and emissaries to influence others on your behalf. And eventually, over time, they evolve to what we call mentors and sponsors. Big difference between the two, though. And we'll spend a little time on that in a moment. So let's explore this. So this art of strategic networking is saying, hey, don't try to work the whole room when you go to a party. Ahead of time, think of the 2 or 3 people that are key for you to meet, the kind of people that you're going to follow up on, the kind of people who are great influencers and can help you with your career and help you get access to the resources and the information that you need to be successful. They're also the people that help you tell your story, and they help you get others, especially decision makers, excited about you. So in this process, we ask everybody to do a SWOT, their own personal SWOT. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And then to establish your own personal board of directors. These are those influencers that you're gonna go to. You already have a few that you go to when you have a question or a new job opportunity, and you bounce ideas off of them. Those are the people that you go to when you've been a little bit wounded and you just need somebody to kind of give you that pat on the back and push you back out on the field. This is your personal board of directors. And in order to do that, think of it. In any company, a board of directors is a dynamic process. New board members come and go, and they shift based upon the needs of that company. Well, you as a person have the same things. As you grow in your career, your needs are going to change. So think about the diversity of the people that you use and leverage as your influencers, and think about how you're going to best leverage them. That's just so important for you to do. Getting decision makers excited about you. You know, the best bullet on this entire box, actually there's 2. The first one and the last one. And I want to spend a little time on it. This first one, networking is a 2-way experience. Typically, when we go into networking, we think, hey, I'm going to get that person's business card because they have something that I need. I would like to ask you to think about when you're networking going forward, make it a 2-way experience. Do your homework ahead of time. And when you reach out to that person, be prepared to offer them something. What a great way to close the deal right up front and get them excited about you so that they will want to follow up. And then lastly, that second bullet, seek advice, not help. Probably the strongest, no pun intended, advice for this entire session. A lot of times when I'm working with and coaching with and mentoring coaches and players and people in both my soccer and my professional life and my personal life, by the time I get to them, they're asking for help. And this is interesting because the information I give them, whether it's advice or help, is exactly the same. It's all about timing. Advice is when we're ahead of the issues. We're ahead of the game. We're being strategic. Information is the same, but now we get to plan it out and stay ahead of the problems, get beyond the barriers and obstacles. Whereas asking for help, the information is the same, but now we're in a hole. And a lot of times that hole may be so big that we can't even dig ourselves out. And then lastly, the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A lot of people have mentors, but very few people have cultivated some of them into sponsors. A sponsor is a person who he or she puts themselves on the line, right? They're an advocate for you. They're the ones in the meeting that says, wait a minute, why isn't Rob's name on this list? He would be great for this job. Matter of fact, I'm going to vouch for him. I'm putting his name in the hopper. Well, now they've committed themselves and their reputation is on the line. That's a sponsor. And you want to develop your mentorships, your mentor relationships into sponsorships. You don't need many, but they have to be at that level. That person's committed for you and about you. Whereas a mentor is still an important role, but that's more for information sharing, and having someone to help you with solving problems. But they're not always the ones that are going to be in that room speaking on your behalf. And you need sponsors to be able to do that. I see that Rob has fallen off. He may be having connecting challenges, so I'm going to keep moving here. This next one is on goal setting. So goal setting, we put this simple graphic together to show the flow of putting together a personal plan. And there's plenty of methodologies out there, but we thought this one was simple enough that everyone can do. And it goes something like this. The really good start is stepping back and doing an assessment. Now, look, I'm smiling here because we've all done this before. Imagining getting a coaching position now that you're taking over a team from another coach, or it's a brand new team or a brand new club. What do? You kind of assess, okay, what's my team? What's the level of my team? How am I going to organize them? And then what league are we going to play in? What are our goals and objectives that I'm going to be putting together? And especially if you're coaching a youth team, for those parents and players. If you're in a higher level, then what are the goals of that level of competition? But we're all good at taking a step back and trying to figure out what's the landscape and what we need to do. And here's 4 areas that you can apply that to your own personal agenda. What are your strengths? What are the things that when you ask people and they say, hey, what do you think? If you talked about me and wanted to know what my strengths are, what would they be, right? And same thing with weaknesses. What are the things that I do that just drive you nuts and you think that I need to work on? And what are some opportunities for me that I can use in my profession as a coach? And what are some threats that I need to be worried about that could actually derail me and keep me from meeting my goals? And kind of list them on a paper. And then from that, create some themes that you're going to use to work on. And then from that, put together a plan that has goals and objectives. And you're actually going to measure yourself personally against that. And several times a year, you pull this out and you say to yourself, how am I doing? And in that same time, use this as a tool to communicate with your club, your boss, your place of work, to say, hey, here's my personal plan. I want to integrate how my own personal and professional goals with yours. And this is a great tool to do that. Welcome back, Rob. We lost you there for a bit.
Yeah, I got kicked out. Sorry
That's
about
all right.
that.
We'll catch up in a sec. Welcome back. So we took this information. Let me go back one slide, everybody. We took this theme, this flow, and we created a model coach, right? So this model coach, this is his or her SWOT analysis, just to give us a tool to discuss. So I want you to look at that briefly. You can see this coach's strengths. You can see this coach's weaknesses, their opportunities, and their threats. Now, some of you who may not be familiar with the SWOT are going, isn't this redundant between strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Well, typically, and there's no hard and fast rule, but when I'm working and coaching other people, I basically say strengths and weaknesses are internal. These are things that you can control. Whereas opportunities and threats are external forces that you can control, but you got to work at it. They're coming from the outside. You're not totally able. There's sort of you have an indirect opportunity to control them, but these are forces that are affecting you from outside. And that way you can keep the two separate. Clearly there's going to be some crossover, but that's a great way to keep these two separate. So then if this coach, he or she has taken this and they put together this is their themes and goal. Less is more. Sometimes we try to be a little bit too granular and it keeps us from getting to where we need to be. So in this case, less is more. So this coach, he or she has picked 4 areas to work on: coaching education, their networking, volunteering, and their risk management. And then from that, they said, here are the 3 key areas that I'm going to focus my time on between now and my next time doing this. I'm going to work on my licenses and diplomas and the ones that she has that are next on his or her list to pursue. They're going to expand their networking and volunteer activities. And we did this specific with regard to the United Soccer Coaches and their state, but it can cross a variety of exposures. And the goal here is to get exposure. Exposure is a key word. You want people to know who you are. And then last, they're going to do a little risk management here to saying, I'm getting a little bit more successful. I think I'm going to move from, and the job roles I look for now, I'm going to move from an independent contractor to an employee, because there are a lot more things that I get as part of being an employee, including benefits and a lot of protection from the risks that I take on personally as an independent contractor. Rob, anything you want to add on this slide?
Yes, I think this is important that we do, and I think I will say that many of us will not do this as it relates to ourselves. We may do it in reference to a project or a particular job, but I think this is critical. So we know who we are, we know what we want to work on, we know what our external forces are. I can tell you, doing a personal SWOT, although I didn't call it that at the time, has helped me throughout my career to progress in the corporate world, including the opportunities that I received at Nike. So I think this is critical, and I'll always tell you that these things always go back to the external from my experience, because like you said, we control the internal. The external is where we need to do a better job understanding the room, reading the room, networking, etc., to put ourselves in a position for progression at those seats at the table again.
Yeah, I can imagine. That had to be a huge requirement, especially working in an organization that's so large and, quite frankly, quite competitive.
Yes, it was, and I tell you, one of the things that sticks out here is the seeking advice, not help. Right? I go, into the interview process, which I knew was going to happen. Not really sure, and many people here may not, understand this, but at the time I went to Nike was not a household name. It was a year pre-Jordan. It's primarily a tennis running company. I'm a finance accounting guy like yourself, and so Nike really didn't tickle my fancy. So, I asked for a lot of advice from folks that I knew that were in the sporting industry, etc., that really helped me through the process, the interview process, really to ask the right questions. And really address, believe it or not, my weaknesses through the interview process. I was prepared for those things with, seeking advice from, really my mentors and advocates at the time.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you, Rob. And I don't know how many of our colleagues even know that your distinguished career at Nike, you've done a lot there. And these things come up all the time. So a couple takeaways from this slide before we go to the next one. We really, really encourage everyone to do this. I know Rob and I, this is a personal exercise we go through every year. I frankly tie mine to my taxes because I hate doing my taxes. And then when I sit down to pull all that stuff together, to send everything off to the IRS and the state, and I try to do it over a weekend. So that's what Saturday is. And then Sunday, I pull all this stuff out and I kind of assess myself. What was good last year that worked well? What are some areas that didn't work well? What are some of the feedback I'm getting from people that I need to really just spend some time investing in? And then what's the landscape? What has changed? I mean, imagine how COVID has changed things for all of us. And so all those things force me to step back. And the faster I do it and the better I do it, it just gives me an advantage over everyone else. And that's something else that Rob and I would like to share with the group. Everyone, please remember this word. And you know it well. You've done it all the time. It's called differentiation. It's that difference when you're having tryouts, right? The players that differentiate themselves to be selected or deselected. And we need to constantly remind ourselves that we're not entitled to be selected.
Right.
Value comes from constantly improving yourself and getting better at what you do. And we know you're all exceptional coaches. I love our meetings with the Black soccer coaches and hearing all the success stories that everyone has. Rob and I would like to offer that you can be better than you already are, perfecting this side of your career. So this is a key slide that we would encourage all of you to think about. And yeah, it's not always fun. It's not always fun to take stock of the things that you're really not good at, but it's important for you to be aware and know that so that you can manage them properly. So with that, we're going to move on to managing risks. And this is an area we're excited about because, quite frankly, this is a fancy word for managing the business side of soccer. So we're going to go through a couple of these things at a very high level. This one is clearly a 2-hour segment, but we're going to give you a little taste of what the module has. And then hopefully all of you listening today will see and seeing today will see the value in this. And hopefully we'll ask Rob and I to continue this and maybe do this module for you or your groups. So let's start the journey. So first of all, managing your career as a business. It's taking that exercise of the SWOT and then starting to ask yourself, what is your core competency? And then exploiting that. And you may say, what does he mean by that? Well, let me use a very good example. Disney's core competency, you may think, most people ask them, what do you think Disney's core competency is? And some people kind of go back to their tagline, creating the magic. Well, that's associated to it, but that's not their core competency. It's service, because they're always so good at what they do. Well, that's part of what their core competency is. And we go through everything around the edges. But if you think about what Disney's core competency is, something they do better than just about everybody else, their core competency is storytelling. And everything they do is built around the art of storytelling. Every merger and acquisition is around storytelling. Their whole cruise line, which is the most profitable part of their business, one of the most profitable part of their business, is all around storytelling. What is your core competency and how do you exploit it? And that should be part of your business. That should be part of your personal brand. And take a step back and start thinking about that, because once you perfect that, boy, talk about differentiation. That's really going to set you apart from everybody else. And then that'll help you create your value. And then all this starts to come together. You say, okay, if this is my core competency, here's how I provide value. Now all of a sudden this forest starts to open up and you can see, there's my path. There's my personal brand. This is the way I'm going to be successful at this career that I call coaching. When you do that, then you take that and you say, I now want to put together a multi-year business plan. Look at the here and now, but also project out a 3 to 5 year plan. I wouldn't go any more than a 3 to 5 year plan, because the world's going to be a lot different 3 years from now. It's definitely going to be a different 5 years from now. Marketing communications. How do people know who you are? How do you celebrate your successes? I would challenge you to go out on any nonprofit website today or any for-profit company. They spend a lot of time showing their impact and their value. That's been one of the biggest changes in homepages for everything, from businesses to institutions of higher learning. They're demonstrating, here's our value. So what is yours? And especially if you have a web page and a website, you want to look at it and say, how do I brand myself? What do people see when they look at my website? Next, let's talk a little bit about the business side. I'm not going to go real deep here because, again, this is a whole course in itself. But think about your business. Think about how you protect yourself. Have you looked at your insurance policies lately and made sure that you're covering all the risks that are out there today? The world is becoming a lot more litigious, and that's just a fancy word to say everybody's suing each other, right? So you need to have the appropriate protection. Quick story, I remember years ago in my coaching career, I was on my way to practice, and a woman ran a stop sign, hit my Jeep broadside. It was virtually a month new, and in about 25 seconds and 4 rolls, because it tumbled, it went from brand new to total. I was at the tow yard looking at it with the insurance adjuster and my insurance agent, and I said, by the way, I was on my way to pick up 3 of my players to take them to practice. What do you think would have been the outcome had they been in the car? And he said, Mike, if they were all wearing their seatbelts, they would have survived. But the one on the passenger side probably would have had some head and neck injuries. And when we have those, we open the claim at a minimum of $6 million. That's the starting point, because they're going to need rehab, all those types of things. And he says, and this woman had the minimum amount of insurance. So she was underinsured under Maryland law. So she had the minimum under the law, but nowhere near what she needed to cover that risk. And of course, because you are a volunteer and you're not properly insured for this exposure, they would have gone after your personal assets had the cost gone up. And I'm going, wow, we got to do something about that. So now I have an umbrella liability coverage in addition to other coverage that I use as a coach that helps protect me from those things that aren't even my fault, but I could be liable for if an event occurred that's out of my control. So I would encourage all of you to have a talk with your insurance agents and go through this. And by the way, we're talking a policy that doesn't cost a whole lot of money, plus you get to write it off as a business expense. Managing risk compliance, all the things we got to do today to be, regardless of the level that you coach, this is someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's child. And whether it's at the professional level or at the youth level, we're being trusted to manage the well-being for these individuals. And so I would also encourage you to take some time and look at managing risks. Everything from how you manage handling bloodborne illnesses. Do you carry a first aid kit to practice? If somebody has a hyper allergy, do you even know that? And if they have an EpiPen, do you actually carry an extra one in your first aid kit for them? It's all those types of things that you have to make a deliberate effort to be prepared for. And then lastly, how are you set up as a business person? And an employment agreement, and we talked about this earlier in the goal setting, versus being an independent contractor versus being a limited liability corporation. They all have different legal upsides and downsides, and you need to explore and investigate which one is the right one for you. They also have upsides and downsides in the way that your income that's generated and your expenses that you apply are treated for tax purposes. And so all these are things that if you haven't done it lately, you might want to take some time to actually explore. And then lastly, personal financial planning, my favorite, because the good thing about my life, and I'm very happy that I had a mentor and a sponsor that really emphasized, Mike, look, $25 a month isn't hard to do. Just get to that point where you can do that. And if you do nothing else, my goodness, you're in your late 20s, early 30s. If you just do that for the next 30 years, you're going to have a lot of money. And boy, I'm glad I took their advice, because that's exactly what happened. And of course, with raises and growth in my career, when I made more money, I could add more to it. But boy, what a great lesson around savings. And I would say that's the biggest one, savings, and getting to the discipline of savings, having an emergency plan, having a budget. All the things you see on this list are just things you really need to do. And we saw this with COVID. People who did this well ended up doing well and were able to weather the storm. Those who didn't do it well, they struggled. And so COVID, as horrible as it was and is, because we're still going through the tail end of it, I hope all of us can see it as a gift of forcing us to step back and take a real good assessment of how exposed am I financially? Have I done the right things to make sure that as a coach, I'm running a business that can withstand itself over time, that me personally, I'm sustainable, and I'm doing the kind of things where I can actually move at some point from this person on the field and transition into more roles that maybe are off the field, but they have more responsibility and a lot more exposure. And how am I planning to do that as I transition the maturity of my coaching career and make sure that I am constantly in a position to be successful and provide value and impact for the greater soccer community. So I'm going to stop there. And Rob, I know you went through a lot of this, especially as in your role as the general manager for game day operations at the Philadelphia Union. I remember when I was there with you as chair of the foundation, I would watch you do all this stuff both ways, your relationship with the community and how you manage that, the way you managed your own personal life, how you helped others that you were mentoring there. Do you mind sharing a story or two that kind of help bring some of this stuff to life for our audience today?
Yes, yeah, I can. It's very interesting because along my career path, I never really envisioned myself running game day operations with, at the Union at the time, 18,000 people. and then eventually venue manager at Lincoln Financial Field with 60,000 people in it. But, it was really, I had to understand what I could and could not do, and which really speaks to the core competency. And, in understanding my weaknesses and, my core competency being connecting with people. I just envision myself as a people person, reaching out to the community through things that are natural, where we came up, where the stadium is in the hood, so to speak, getting out to barbershops, stopping in the schools, and just keep in mind, there's probably a year and a half run up to our first game, but knowing that the community would need to be involved to help me be successful, not only inside the stadium, but outside of the stadium. I would need volunteers. I needed to staff full-time employees, et cetera. But through that whole process of developing my brand in a new community helped me be successful on field. And then once inside the stadium, there's just a myriad of things that have to happen. And, I just give you a simple example. I mean, there's not enough eyes that I could hire. So I literally made it my personal mission to walk around the stadium and talk to everybody in the front row. And over time, if there was something going awry, as my people are walking around the stadium, they'd say, "Hey, you need to radio Rob," to make sure things didn't spill onto a broadcast. But, and through the, I just want to reflect back for 1 minute on the modules that we have done, and some of the guests that we've had. When I look at managing your career as a business, what immediately comes to mind are two guys that we had on, Mauricio and JT Dorsey. They clearly have some core competencies that led them in the directions that they went in. JT has a nonprofit. Mauricio does what he does, with his apparel line, footballer, the crack. They have a vision. They've done a lot of the things that we've overviewed today, and they do it very well. That's why they're as successful as they are. And I'll go a step further and tell you that, through the networking process between JT and I, myself as well as you have become an advocate to get him opportunities that may or may not have happened because we had seats at certain tables. So there you go.
Great. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. So we got about 7 minutes, Rob. Give me a virtual high five, brother. We got through the material.
Ooh.
So I think what we can do is figure out how to maybe look at the chat and take some questions. But before we do that, in case we get cut off, for our audience, we're going to just show you this last slide, which is clearly a thank you from Rob and I. We wanted you to see our email addresses because we know that we won't be able to answer all the questions that people might have. But I speak on behalf of Rob that we are always willing to respond to anybody and help anybody who has a need out there. So please take note of these email addresses. And if we said something that kind of touched you in a way that you want to, and it showed up for you in a way that you want to reach out to us, if we can't help you personally, I assure you we can find the person who can, and we would be more than willing to do that, because I know I speak on behalf of Rob. He and I both would not be sitting here in the positions that we're in if people hadn't reached out and helped us. So with that, I'm going to see if I can stop sharing and pull up the chat. And maybe Rob, you and I can spend the rest of our time doing that. There we go. And I see a couple out here. So let me pull them up. Rob, can you see them or you want me to just read them off?
You need to read them off. I cannot see them.
Okay. I don't see a question yet. Oh. And can we see some of the full sessions throughout the year came up? And the last slide that had the topics, let me just bring that up real quick again. And let me go back one slide. And these are the 5 topics of the modules that the Black Soccer Coaches group has graciously supported Rob and I in pulling together. And today we just took a quick flyby. Like I said, each one of them is 2 hours, and it includes about half an hour of content, another almost hour, or at least 45 minutes of having guests who we believe exemplify these topics, and they become our panelists. And we kind of have a little chat with them to emphasize what we went over. And then the last hour is Q&A from the audience. We found that format is very engaging, and it brings the content to life, and it worked really well. And so far we've done the goal setting and connecting and behavior modules. And we have completed the managing risks and expertise modules, and we want to launch those. And then we're going to start repeating them for a while as a pilot so that we can get good at it and then figure out how we can scale this over time. But we wanted to make sure we set this up as an opportunity for the Black soccer coaches to make an additional contribution to the curriculum. And we would love your feedback. Again, our email addresses are out there on that screen on whether you think it's valuable or not. And over time, any areas where we can tweak it. I have a coach here saying, I found extremely hard as a Black woman coach to garner mentors, and not even gotten to the sponsorship piece in the soccer coaching realm. Can you suggest some effective ways to accomplish this? That's an outstanding question. And yep. I'm avoiding mentioning who these questions are coming from because I'm not quite sure if I have your permission to expose that. But please reach out to Rob and I personally, because we both have coached both men and women and boys and girls. And I think we both can add some credence to that. But I would share 2 things with you. One, women are amazing in their ability to collaborate with one another. And personally, I know I'm going to get criticism from this, but I just think they do it far better than men. And we see it across a variety of things of how they support one another. So I would definitely reach out. But here's the key. You don't necessarily have to find that support in the soccer world. There's the key. Because I know as a young Black coach, there weren't a whole lot of people that looked like me who were as successful. I mean, when we have our Black Soccer Coaches Committee meetings, I just have to kind of sometimes turn off because my eyes are starting to water with the joy I see of all these wonderful, successful Black coaches. There's no way we would have had that many people back in my day. So I had to learn how to network and make those connections outside of my space. Still asking the same questions, but I had to get people excited about me who could then get inside. And I would tell you that many of those folks were very interesting because they knew a lot more about me than I thought they knew, and were very helpful in giving me advice. So I would start there. Rob, anything you want to add on that?
Yes, I mean, I would echo that, but I would also tell you it's really about, to me, strategic networking. And we talk about who's in the room, and this is, not just soccer wise, but you're absolutely right. It's corporate wise, etc. Know is who is in the room, and then strategically, I ask questions more out of curiosity and develop a relationship. And just keep in mind that sponsorship evolves and advocacy evolves in these scenarios. And once you are having that dialogue where you're learning and seeking advice, you'd be surprised the number of people that will actually direct you to network with other people that they know. And then over time, you develop that sponsor, if you will. So it's sometimes being uncomfortable because you're going to be approaching someone that you don't really know. And that's been my experience. And why I believe I'm a connector is I got comfortable with being uncomfortable in approaching very high level people. I approached Phil Knight and sat down and had lunch with him. He did not invite me. I sat down asked him if I could sit down with him and ask him a few questions. And it was very interesting to see the people's faces in the room because you just don't do that. But I felt I didn't have anything to lose and a whole lot to gain from a knowledge perspective. So I did it.
Yeah. So we're up on our time. I just want to say one more thing before we leave. And it really is important that you diversify your network. You know, homogeneity is not a good thing if you want to advance. You've got to get diversity within your network. And that will expose you to the people and resources you need to be successful. So Rob, look, brother, I always love doing this with you. And thank you so much for all your help. And I want to thank the Black Soccer Coaches Advocacy Group for all the things that they do to support us and to support the game of soccer. And I encourage all of you to get involved. And regardless of who you are in your background, you know, take some time to explore who we are and wherever you can provide support. Or if you have a need, hey, show up. We'd love to have you. So with that, Rob, anything you want to say before we leave?
Yeah, I'd like to thank you again for doing this wonderful presentation. But first and foremost, Nicole, for leading the group and continuing to push us forward as our Black female leader. We love you. We're proud of you, Princess.
Thank you, everyone. Have fun and make sure you show up at the reception. Take care, Rob.
All right, take care.